Kitty Burns. Welcome to Everyday Dish TV, and today I'm going to be making samosas, but not just any kind of samosa. I am making gluten-free samosas for all of you vegan gluten-free folks like me who love Indian food. So the first thing we're going to do, we have a cast iron skillet heating up to medium-high, and I've got some canola oil. You can use any kind of light flavored oil for this. I wouldn't recommend using an olive oil, but if you want to use grapeseed oil or something like that, you can. And we have raw cashew pieces, and we're going to add those to the oil. And we want to get a little bit of color on these, so these are going to need to cook a little bit. If you don't get a sizzle to your pan, you might want to turn it up a little bit. And you need to watch these because once they start to brown, they're going to get brown really, really fast. And we're also going to be adding onions, and so you don't want them to be too dark, or by the time the onions come in, they're going to be overly brown. So what we are looking for is we want the cashews to just start getting some color. You don't want them to be too dark. And cashews actually aren't a very traditional ingredient in samosas, but I like to use them because I think they add a lot of flavor and a really nice texture at the end, and it's not a lot. And so once there's color on those, we're going to add the onion, and we're just going to stir that up a little bit. And I always like to add salt when I'm cooking onions because I think it helps draw the liquid out of the onion and cook a little bit faster. And I'm just going to let that go for a second, and then I'm going to add the aromatic that I'm using for this is some freshly chopped up ginger. We just put that on a microplane and got a really good texture. You can see that the cashews are picking up more color, so that's why you just really want to watch those at first, because they will burn really, really fast if you're not paying attention. And then once the onions cook a little bit and just start to become clear, we're going to add cumin seeds, and this is freshly ground coriander, and it actually looks like a lot of a spice, but coriander doesn't add any heat to the dish at all. It really adds a nice lemony flavor, and it's how you kind of get a nice gravy out of this. And we're going to mix that with the potatoes, and it's going to just add a really nice tangy flavor to the potatoes. So you can see that the onions are just starting to get clear. So what I'm going to do is add the cumin seeds, stir that up. And whenever you're making Indian food, you always want to make sure that the spices that you're using either get toasted over heat or cooked in a little bit of oil, because that really draws out the flavor. Otherwise, the flavors and the spices are not going to shine, and they're going to end up being a lot. So the onions also don't need to be like cooked super all the way through, because once we mix this in with the potatoes, they're going to bake in the oven for about 25 minutes. So there is going to be additional cooking time, but we just want to keep this going enough where we can smell the savory, delicious aroma coming out of the spices. That's probably the most important thing. Okay, so the spices are done and the onions have cooked through a good amount. They're transparent. So what I'm going to do is turn this off, and we're going to mix the masala into our potatoes. So what I've got in this bowl are pre-steamed potatoes that are chopped, I would say, into 3/4 inch cubes. Some people like to use mashed potatoes for this. I personally like the texture of cube potatoes a lot more. And the hot spices are going right in there. And, oops, I just made a huge mess. One thing that I like to do whenever I'm cooking spices, and I always feel like there's this yummy stuff in the pan that I can't get out, is I take a nice handful of whatever I'm mixing in, and I put it into the pan. This works really good, like if you're making dal too, and you want to get those extra spices out, and you just stir this around, and then all that good stuff comes out. So I'm just going to give this a really good mix. And I'm using some frozen peas for this. What you can do is, if your potatoes are still warm, you can go ahead and just add the frozen peas in and stir it, and the heat from the potatoes will soften the peas. Since we pre-steam these potatoes and they're not hot, if you have frozen peas, all you have to do is run them in a colander under some warm water, and they'll totally be defrosted enough to use. They don't have to be super, super soft. And then I'm also adding, this is a half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper, and you can use less or more cayenne pepper to taste, but I think a half a teaspoon gives a good amount of flavor for this. So because the peas are in here, we're just gonna toss this really carefully, just so we don't crush things up, and also because I like to keep the potatoes intact. I don't want to end up with a mush. And then I've got a half of a lemon. Actually, this is, I think, a tablespoon of lemon juice that I'm going to mix in. If you don't have lemon juice at your house and you cook Indian food a lot and you happen to have some amchur, you can use that instead. Amchur is a green ground mango powder that also has a tangy, almost citrus-like flavor. So once you have your potato masala mixed, what we're going to do is roll these into rice paper wrappers. Okay, so we have the potato masala completely mixed. One thing I like to do, since we're already making a non-traditional samosa, is we have cashews that aren't necessarily traditional in here, and we're going to use a non-traditional wrap, is I like to add a little bit of color just for color and texture. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try not to shave my fingers off into the potatoes, but I like to use a mandolin and just a little bit of the carrot. You don't have to cook it because they're going to bake in the oven, and these are going to be thin enough that they're going to cook into the potatoes. Plus, mandolins are really fun to use, so I try to use them whenever I can. So you can just put in as much as you want. You don't want it like super carroty, but I like to add just enough for color. You can see I have this set on a really thin setting just for color. That's good. And I'm just going to give that one more mix. Okay, so we're all set. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a workstation. And I've found that when I'm using rice paper wrappers, which is what we're going to use for the samosas, that it helps to have an absorbent, smooth towel set up in front of you. And the wrappers that we're going to use today are called Bon Trang, and these are actually made out of tapioca flour, water, and salt. Those are the only ingredients in these. You can also find ones that are made with rice flour instead of tapioca. The rice flour ones are great. They're a little bit stickier to use, so I would suggest if you're working with these for the first time that you try to find the tapioca wrappers instead. But the rice, they bake exactly the same, so there's no issue. And this is what they look like if you've never seen them before. Usually these are made for salad rolls, but I found that if you brush these really lightly with oil and bake them, they make a really great gluten-free wrap. So that's actually what we're going to be doing. And you can see there's a nice texture on these. I think that they lay these out on mat, like plant mats, and the wrapper actually picks up the texture from the mat. So I already have one soaking. So in order to use these, it's really easy. You just get a tray or a pie plate and filled with hot water. It doesn't need to be boiling hot water. And if you just put a wrapper in here, I usually actually do one or two at a time. If you do more than that, they tend to stick and they're a little bit hard to manage. But you just put one in for about 45 seconds. And it just becomes really soft and pliable like that, and that's why the towel comes in really useful. So I just lay it on top of the towel, and you definitely want to smooth it out. These have a tendency to stick to themselves, but the rice wrappers are much, much stickier than this, so this is really not bad. So you just smooth it out, and you can use a sharp knife. I have this handy-dandy massive pizza cutter, so just going to cut it in half right through the center, and you just push down, and that's all it takes. You can see that it cuts right through. And then one sheet makes 2 samosas. So these are going to be, I would say, small to medium-sized samosas. And I like to use an ice cream scoop or a cookie scoop, whatever you call these, for the potatoes. So I'm just going to take a nice scoop. You don't want to do too much because you'll have a hard time rolling this up. But I just put in the middle. I press down just a little bit. And then so the one thing that I really like about samosas is they come in triangles and they have a nice point. So when you're making these, you want to keep that in mind, and you just fold along the curved edge, and this is going to be your top point. And when they bake in the oven, these don't burst or anything. So you'll see that they actually have a really nice samosa shape. And then once you've folded that down, you're going to just take the end and fold it up. just like that. So they're really easy to make, and especially if you get to this point and you're making for a party, because this recipe makes 18, if you can get somebody to come and help you, it makes things go a lot easier. So this is my last samosa. Got that nice sharp point on the top that I like, and I'm just going to transfer this over to the cookie sheet. And one really nice thing about these is they don't need a lot of oil at all to get crispy. In fact, the least amount of oil you use, the better they come out. If you use too much, they tend to be a little bit greasy. And all of these are already done, so I'm just going to lightly do this last one. And you brush one side, and then just really carefully, because the wraps are super soft, just flip it over and just lightly get the other side. And then this is ready to go in the oven. The oven is set between 375 and 400 degrees, and these need to bake for, I'd say, about 20 minutes. You keep them in for 10 minutes until they start browning on one side, and then take them out halfway through, flip them over, and you'll see them at the end when they're all golden brown. Okay, so while the samosas are baking, I'm gonna make a really simple and quick cilantro chutney. And I really like this because these are ingredients that I usually have at hand all the time. Coconut, yogurt, everything just goes right into the blender. It's pretty easy. Spatula does help sometimes. So that's coconut yogurt and a coin of ginger, and I'm lazy, so I'm not even going to chop it. I'm going to let this magical machine do the work for me. Clove of garlic. The same with the cayenne. Whenever I'm cooking any of my recipes, you can always vary the heat. So instead of putting cayenne pepper in the chutney, we're going to do, it's a green chutney, we're going to do a little bit of, that's a jalapeno, but you can use serrano. If you want hotter, you can do hotter. We're going to do a little bit of lemon juice. Usually I would say about a half of one lemon. That was a real fat lemon, so I don't think I'm going to put all of that in there. And then I'm going to pulse this up so that the ginger and the garlic blend. Just so there's no chunks of spicy things for somebody to bite into. And then I would say a small bunch of cilantro. This has already been cleaned. Sometimes cilantro can be really muddy, so you just want to go through it. And for cilantro chutney, stems are totally fine, so you don't need to waste that. The whole thing just goes right in. And if you are a cilantro hater, you could make something like this with a little bit of mint. I wouldn't recommend trying this with parsley. I don't think you're going to get the right flavor, but a peppermint or a spearmint would definitely be okay. And this whole thing is just going to get blended up. And that's it. And then I would add salt to taste. So you get a good salty flavor, and you can garnish this with some whole leaves of cilantro. And then when the samosas are done, you can just dip these right in there. Another really quick Indian snack that I like is papadums. You can find them at the Indian grocery store usually. You can get a big packet for about $1.30, and they are naturally gluten-free. They're just made out of lentils and spices. If you get some of the flavored varieties, you just want to check and make sure that they don't have any asafoetida in them, because that's a spice that commonly has wheat powder. So you just want to get something that doesn't have wheat if you're cooking for somebody that's gluten-free or for yourself. That's it. Look how green it is. It's delicious. Okay. So it's been 10 minutes, and these are starting to brown. So I'm going to take them out and flip them over. And you can see that they're already starting to get quite crispy. So these are going to go back in the oven probably for another 10 to 12 minutes until they are golden brown and crispy all over. So the samosas have been browning in the oven for 20 minutes, and they're done. So I'm going to take them out. Hot and crispy. I'm just going to look on the other side and see how they are. Golden brown, just the way we want. And those points that we work so hard when we're folding, you can see they're sharp just like a true samosa, even though they don't have a pastry crust, but they're better because they're gluten-free and delicious, and I can eat them. Thank you so much for watching Everyday Dish TV. This recipe will be in my upcoming gluten-free vegan zine, as yet untitled, so look forward to seeing that finished and completed. In the meantime, I have another zine that I wrote a few years ago called Papa Tofu that's still available on my blog, and you can find links to that on www.kittycake.blogspot.com or my recipe website, which is pakupaku.info. Thanks again for watching. Enjoy the samosas.